Okay, so the pattern we're going to be talking about today is a waltz worm. This is a very versatile pattern. It's something I think should be in everyone's fly box, no matter what waters you fish. If you've got caddis, you should have some waltz worms. And this is not really so much as a pattern as much as it is kind of a jumping point or a starting point to tie anything caddis, in my opinion, because really the only things you had to have to make it a waltz worm is a hook, a bead, some kind of dubbing, and some kind of ribbing. So that leaves you a lot of possibilities. I tie them in a lot of sizes. I mostly fish them from 18s to 14s. Tie them with beads anywhere from 2mm to 3.5. You could go much larger than that if you wanted to. I tie them on jig hooks, on scud hooks. I like them a lot on scud hooks. That's what I tie most of mine on, and then do all kinds of dubbings. I think the original is hare's ear dubbing with a wire rib. I've used hare's ear dubbing in different colors. I use Squirrel, SLF, spiky SLF. I use a lot of ice dub. I use dubbing blends. I've used ice dub in about every color that I own. I've tied white ones, tan ones, orange, caddis green, the olive, UV brown, which has become one of my favorite colors. This is actually a UV brown one right here. And there's UV brown's become one of my favorite colors in a lot of things. MFC actually sells waltz worms on a jig hook in a color they call UV brown. It's not if you just use the straight UV brown ice dub, it's not quite the same color, but it's close. But anyway, so you can use all kinds of different dubbings, and then you add into that the rib. I mean, you can use any color wire rib you can use. I've used holographic tinsel in green, or in olive, in purple, and then I've used Semperfli, Perdigon body. So really any kind of rib. You can see how the possibilities of this thing start to get endless. And that's not even addressing the fact that you can tie it with different thread colors. You can tie it with, like a bright, you can tie it with a more neutral color like this brown, or you can tie it with a bright thread like a pink or a fluorescent orange, and that'll show through your dubbing a little bit if you're careful to dub it, pretty sparsely. And then you start getting into different collars and hot spots. I do them with pink, orange, chartreuse hot spots. And then add into that, you can start putting soft tackles on it. So, a partridge collar, or just a hen cape feather. So this really is, endless possibilities with this. But to keep it simple, I'm gonna tie two. The first one's gonna be really basic. It's just gonna be a natural dubbing in gray with a wire rib, kind of your basic waltz worm. And the second one I'm going to do is going to be a UV brown with a tinsel rib. And I'll also show you how to do, if you're going to do a weaker rib like that, I say tinsel, I'm going to do the Semperfli Perdigon body. But when you do a rib like that, I like to also rib that again with monofilament. So one of your ribs is for the the look, and then the monofilament rib being for the actual durability of it. So we'll dive into both of those and show you how to do a really basic one, and then one that's got a little bit more to it and a little bit of a thread hot spot. All right, so both of these I'm going to tie today are going to be on size 16 scud hook. Like I said, I tie a lot of these in the tie them anywhere from, I've gone as small as 20, I've gone up to 12, but most of them that I tie in a 16 or an 18 with about a 2.4 bead, which is what we've got on there today. These are an Umpqua U202 hook. I use these hooks like Frank's Red Hot, man. I put that on everything. I tie a lot of caddis patterns on these, a lot of my mayflies and midges on these. I tie a very disproportionate number of my nymphs on this U202. They're pretty cheap. They're good hooks. I don't think I've ever broken one. The only downside of that hook is that if you like to keep your barbs, you pretty much have to pinch the barb to get any bead on there. There are very few beads I've been able to put on these hooks without pinching the barbs. But I pinch most of my barbs anyways, so not a big deal for me. Now, like I said, this is a very simple pattern, very quick to tie. The first one I'm going to do in more of a traditional color scheme, kind of what I started tying these with. So I've got a copper bead there. I've got brown thread. This is UTC 70 denier. So you can lay down a thread base and then capture your wire. I've got small copper wire on here. I'm going to wrap it all the way down to where it starts going down the bend a little bit. And now I'm going to hit this with some dubbing wax. And I'm actually going to use, like I said, this is the way I started tying these. And I started tying these with squirrel dubbing that I got off a squirrel that I shot back in here on my property. Yeah, it's just a really natural color. It's a nice gray. It's got a lot of guard hairs in it. I like to get a good taper on these and start pretty fine on the back, but it's not that important. I caught a lot of fish on these back when I sucked at tying and my dubbing had, not really any taper to it at all. So it's not something you have to worry that much about. Hit this again, get a little bit more dubbing on there. And I do like this squirrel with just full guard hairs in it because it's really spiky, and I personally like that a lot for some of my nymphs. But I think, like I said, I think the original actually uses hare's ear or hare's mask or something like that. And I've used about every dubbing I have for these at some point or another. I don't think I've used laser dub on these, but I'm not huge on laser dub as a dubbing anyways, like for doing this right here. Use it a lot for streamers and whatnot. Just get that nice and full. Throw a little half hitch in there. And now I'm going to wrap this wire. And for this one, I am wrapping this rib the same direction I wrap my thread, same direction I'm dubbing it and everything. Now for the next one I'm going to do, because I'm going to do tinsel and then mono over it, I'm actually going to start my tinsel going the opposite way that I'm taking this wire right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I do that one, but I'm going to capture that with a few wraps. Give it a little whip finish, and a second one just to make me feel better about it. I'm going to trim my thread, helicopter this wire off, and I'm going to trim a couple of these guard hairs just to kind of keep them in check a little bit. And that is your basic waltz worm right there. Okay, so this second one we're going to do is a little less traditional. This is in a UV brown color, so I'm going to be tying this with a UV brown eye stub. It looks even better if you mix it with some tan spiky SLF. I like to mix those in bigger batches. I'm out of that right now, so I'm just going to go for the straight UV brown. I'm also going to use a pink thread. This is UTC 70 as well, just like the last one. Now the rib I'm going to use on this is the Semperfli Perdigon body in iridescent purple. And then I'm going to go over that with some 6X monofilament to kind of be the actual functional rib, the thing that adds durability to it here. And yeah, like I said, this one's a little less traditional. This UV brown has become one of my favorite colors of eye stub. I put this on a lot of stuff. It's become the dubbing I use for my Rainbow Warriors. I put it on some pheasant tails. I put it in a lot of my streamers. I'll use it as little accent pieces on the around the gills. And there's also a UV brown polar chenille, and I've started using that a lot too. It's really become one of my favorite colors. I use that UV brown polar chenille in between segments of bucktail on my musky flies, and it just adds a nice little bit of shimmer in there in the middle. So yeah, I would highly recommend, if you don't use this color in anything, that you start using it. Now this is the wrong size thread. 1 second. Okay, now we're back. I actually have 70 denier on here. I accidentally pulled out my 140 before. And now we're gonna start. Now I'm gonna tie this entire fly with this pink thread because I'm gonna do a little pink collar at the front end of it. If you are worried about this pink showing through, you can absolutely do this fly, do the rest, most of it with a more natural color thread, and then switch over to the pink at the end. But I like to tie these flies because they're simple, so I like to try to keep it simple. So now I'm going to tie in my Perdigon body and wrap that back to where I start going down the bend, come back to the front, and I'm going to take my piece of monofilament and tie it back in to the same point. Now I'm going to hit this with some dubbing wax. And I'm going to show y'all a little trick to get your eye stub nice and tight, because this stuff doesn't like to dub really fine and really tight. So one thing I've seen a lot of other guys do is you start, I'm gonna get this vise where you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Get your dubbing needle there, nice and tight, right at the base, right next to the hook, and then slide it up to the hook. See if I can get this to stay on there. There we go. And do a couple wraps. And that kind of locks it in where you can now pull against that to get it nice and tight. But it does work, but the issue with that is, you see, if I get this whole thing nice and tight, it's tight now, and then I start wrapping and wrapping, and it's starting to get looser, particularly down here. You can see that that's starting to loosen up some. So what I like to do, I do those couple wraps to lock everything in. I'm actually going to get just a little more dubbing on there. So I'm going to get that dubbing started so I can pull against that. And then once I pull against it and twist and get that nice and tight, I'm actually going to hold that right there. I'm going to hold that thread with my fingers and wrap like this, and it doesn't come loose on me. So I'm not holding this by the bobbin anymore. I'm holding it by that thread. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to get the rest of this nice and tight. I'm going to hold it right down here so it can't unwind on me. and start loosening up that dubbing noodle. And I believe I've got enough there, so I'm just going to kind of pull the rest of this off. Get that nice and tight around my thread. Right there. Okay, now is when this starts getting a little strange. I'm going to throw a half hitch in there. Trim a couple of those stray fibers. So, when you're wrapping this Perdigon body, that's what you're going to wrap first. And for any kind of weak stuff like this that you're going to go over with monofilament, I'm going to wrap this the opposite of the direction I did my wire. So instead of wrapping it same way I wrap the thread, I'm going to go back the other direction. And the reason for this is between this and your monofilament, one of them is going to get wrapped the same direction as your thread. One of them is going to get wrapped the opposite because you need that mono crossing over this Perdigon body. And because that monofilament is the more difficult piece to tie in, it's more slippery, it's less cooperative, I want that to be the bit that is going with my thread. Because as I tie this in, I'm going to trim that Perdigon body now. When something's going the opposite way of your thread and you go to tie it in, your wraps, as you pull over that, are loosening whatever you just wrapped. So if I wrap my monofilament, or if I wrap my Perdigon body the same way I wrap my wire, then I'm wrapping my monofilament backwards and I'm taking the more difficult thing to tie in, and as I tie it in, it's loosening that up. I want my monofilament going that way. That way when I pull thread wraps over it and pull down tight, it's actually making it tighter. So to get my monofilament going that way, I have to go the opposite direction to start with my rib. So it takes a little bit of thinking through your plan there, but and does it really matter if you do it the opposite way? Probably not. But it makes me feel better because now this mono is tied down more securely. So I capture that, do a few extra wraps here just to have a nice little collar. And I'm going to hit it with a couple whip finishes. One more. Cut that close. Cut that monofilament. And there's your UV brown. You can hit this with some head cement if you want to, but I really don't hardly ever put head cement on my flies. I just, we wind up donating them to the trees before we ever have them unwind on us. A couple other things before I end this video. One, I am doing a fly tying demo at Little River Outfitters in Townsend, Tennessee on Sunday, March 3rd. So if you're in the area, put that on your calendar, come out and see it. They've also got a whole lineup of people doing tying demos on Saturdays and Sundays over this winter. I will be at quite a few of them. They've got some awesome local guides and also just some really knowledgeable local anglers. So there will be some really good ones to check out. So make sure you go over to their website and look at that lineup. The other thing, I'm selling this vise. This is a Wolf Industries Atlas rotary vise. I've been tying on it for a couple of years now. I'm trying to get $175 out of it. So it's on my Facebook Marketplace. It's also on Fly Fishing Online Garage Sale on Facebook. So yeah, if you're interested, let me know. And thanks for watching.